into March, I realized that locking down wasn't necessary. In fact, I was so naive at the time. I had no idea. I thought I would call a few people. I had some connections with the medical community, pretty extensive actually, in my state, and I thought I could call around and let people know, like, hey, we've got a strategy here. It's not bad. We can prophylax, and we could use hydroxychloroquine as a first-line therapy. We don't need to lock down. We can protect our elderly with prophylaxis, really low doses. And I actually thought that that was actually going to be well received. Instead, I was told to go home and to go home and don't use the personal protective equipment because I was just wasting resources. And I literally was on the phone. I won't say who it was, but a fairly well high-up person in our society in Texas on one of the boards. And I told him, I said, how old are you? He said, I'm 40-something. I said, look, I've been through the AIDS epidemic, okay? We didn't know if we touched the patients what was going to happen. And I go, I've been through another, that pandemic itself was very eye-opening for me. I was very scared. I was a young doc, and I didn't go home. I went to work. I'm going to see patients. I told them right then, I said, look, I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but as far as I'm concerned, you're a coward. You go home. You go home. I said, I'm not going home. I'm going to work. I go, I've done 6 years in the ER, 100, 200 hours a month. I've been on a bunch of trauma teams. I'm not going home. I'm going to see patients. So that turned into short visits with some of my friends, some of my patients who would call me knowing that I had talked to them about this disease, and I ended up treating the disease. And then I got on a Facebook Live video that in about 2 hours reached 100,000 people. And I saw it and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get some repercussions. Sure enough, I did. The board came calling and they said, you said that hydroxychloroquine works and you're basically a public menace. And you know, we want to know who you treated. You said at the time, it was really early on, I said I treated 3 patients. And I had to provide all the records, all the information. I was very intimidated, as you might imagine, because, you know, I have to practice. I have to feed my family. I love what I'm doing, but, you know, I'm not independently wealthy. I was a little bit afraid. I really was. That lasted about a day. At that point, you know, again, as Dr. Gold said, we've got to do the right thing for the patients. And at the time, I wrote a bunch of letters saying, I'm not going to let my patients get on vents and ECMO. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to allow it to happen. I'm going to treat them. I don't care. Well, suffice it to say, you know, I got reprimanded. I'm still in a process of negotiation with that whole thing. But as Dr. Armstrong said, I'm really not afraid. I know I'm doing the right thing. I've treated a number of patients. I won't say how many because then I'll probably have to provide records for all that. So for the purposes of this statement, I'm going to say I treated 3. Okay? So the board is, the fear of reprisal is the reason why we're in this place right now. Docs don't want to do this. There's a fear of reprisal. I was very worried about it, and I can tell you all the people who believe in this medication, who believe in early treatment, feel the same way. They're really scared to go forward and treat patients because they don't want to lose their medical license, and that's a big deal.
Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Fauci, do protests increase the spread of the virus?
Do protests increase the spread of the virus? I think I can make a general statement.
Well, 500,000 protesters on June 6th alone.
Yeah.
I'm just asking, that number of people, does it increase the spread of the virus?
Crowding together, particularly when you're not wearing a mask, contributes to the spread of the virus.
Should we limit the protesting?
I'm not sure what you mean. How do we say limit the protesting?
Should government limit the protesting?
I don't think that's relevant to.
Well, you just said if it increases the spread of the virus. I'm just asking, should we limit it?
Well, I'm not in a position to determine what the government can do in a forceful way.
Well, you make all kinds of recommendations. You make comments on dating, on baseball, on everything you can imagine. I'm just asking you, just said that protests increase the spread. I'm just asking you, should we try to limit the protests?
No, I think I would leave that to people who have more of a position to do that. I can tell you.
Government stopping people from going to church, Dr. Fauci?
Yeah.
Last week in the Calvary Chapel case, 5 liberals on the Supreme Court said it was okay for Nevada to limit church services. Justice Gorsuch said it best. He said, there's no world in which the Constitution permits Nevada to favor Caesar's Palace over Calvary Chapel. I'm just asking, is there a world where the Constitution says you can favor one First Amendment liberty, protesting, over another, practicing your faith?
I'm not favoring anybody over anybody. I'm just making a statement that's a broad statement that avoid crowds of any type, no matter where you are, because that leads to the acquisition and transmission. And I don't judge one crowd versus another crowd. When you're in a crowd, particularly if you're not wearing a mask, that induces the spread.
It's a simple question, Doctor. Should we limit the protests? Government is obviously limiting people going to church. And look, there's been no violence that I can see at church. I haven't seen people during a church service go out and harm police officers or burn buildings. But we know that, for 63 days, 9 weeks, it's been happening in Portland.
Right. Yeah.
Well, one night in Chicago, 49 officers were injured. But no limit to protests, but boy, you can't go to church on Sunday.
What was the,
I don't know how many times I can answer that. I'm not going to opine on limiting anything. I'm just going to tell you.
You've opined on a lot of things, Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, but I've never
This
said
is something that directly impacts the spread of the virus, and I'm asking your position on the protest.
Yeah, I'm not going to opine on limiting anything. I'm telling you what it is, the danger. And you can make your own conclusion about that. You should stay away from crowds, no matter where the crowds are.
Government has stopped people from going to work. In fact, just in New Jersey 4 days ago, Ian Smith, Frank Trombetta were arrested for trying to operate their business, their gym. They were arrested. But my bet is, if these two individuals own this gym were outside just in front of their gym, and all the people who were working out in their gym were outside protesting, they'd been just fine. But because they were in the gym working out, actually running their business, they got arrested. You think that's okay?
I'm not going to opine on who gets arrested and who does not. You get where I'm going. I'm telling you, as a public health official, I say crowds.
Do you see the inconsistency, though, Dr. Fauci?
There's no inconsistency, Congressman.
So you're allowed to protest, millions of people on one day in crowds yelling, screaming, but you try to run your business, you get arrested? And if you stood right outside of that same business and protested, you wouldn't get arrested? You don't see an inconsistency there?
I don't understand what you're asking me as a public health official to opine on who should get arrested or not. That's not my position. You could ask me as much as you want.
You've advocated for certain businesses.
You've
advocated for certain businesses to be shut down. I'm just asking you on your position on the protest. I haven't seen one. We've heard a lot about hair salons. I haven't seen one hairstylist who, between haircuts, goes out and attacks police or sets something on fire. But we've seen all kinds of that stuff during protests, and we know the protest actually increased the spread of the virus. You've said that.
I said crowds. I didn't say specifically. I didn't say protests do anything.
So the protests don't increase the spread of the virus?
I didn't say that. You're putting words in my mouth.
No, I just want an answer to the question. Do the protests increase the spread of the virus?
I don't have any scientific evidence that anything. I can tell you that crowds are known, particularly when you don't have a mask, to increase the acquisition and transmission. No matter what the crowd is. So you don't have a position on whether the protests increase the spread of the virus or don't increase the spread of the virus? I'm saying that crowds, wherever the crowds are, can give you an increased probability that there's going to be acquisition and transmission.
But do you understand Americans' concern? Protesting, particularly according to the Democrats, is just fine, but you can't go to work, you can't go to school, you can't go to church. There's limits placed on all three of those fundamental activities, First Amendment activities, but protesting is just fine.
The gentleman's time has expired, but I'll just ask the gentleman to just think about his question and put it in reference to crowds that gather at political meetings, at fundraisers without masks, on an oil rig in Texas, nobody wearing a mask, nobody social distancing, but a fundraiser.
Right.
Would that be problematic? With that, I'll yield 5 minutes to Mr. Foster.
For more news update, visit our website, www.bvichannel1.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on all our social media platforms. From the links below, download and install our mobile apps to have all information at the tips of your fingers. Please share, like, and drop your comments. Thanks for watching.